And we are live. Welcome to episode 2. I don't know why I'm calling it episodes. It feels episodic to me. Of Barnes Babes Book Club. I am Paige. You're on my channel, and we are here to discuss Siege and Storm. That is a very hard title to say. I'm going to let everybody else introduce themselves and say their rating, if they have any rating for this book, and then I'll get into like the spoilery sort of like summary of what happens.
Hi, everybody. My name is Hannah. I'm from the channel StoryNet. I'm the co-host of the Barnes Babes Book Club. One day I will learn how to say the name of our book club. So my rating when I first read Siege and Storm years ago was 3. I think I'm still kind of in that, but maybe a bit more this time, like 3.5 possibly.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Dulcie, friend of Paige and Hannah's, and I think I increasingly like the books over the series. So I think like when I first read this, I probably gave it like 4.5, and I'm still like pretty solid in there. Also, I give like 4.5s and 5s very easily. So.
Anais, you unmuted.
I thought we did it at the same time. Anyway, I'm Anais, also a friend of our co-hosts, and I'm like a 3.5, a 3.5, mostly because I like got really mad at Alina and Mal for like the majority of the Little Palace part, and I was like, could you just not be dumb though? And love the rest of it. So yeah, I guess like a 3.5, maybe.
Hi, I'm Kira. I'm also a friend of the club. I guess. They know me. I think I would also give Siege and Storm kind of like 3.5 and then around there, mostly because I was also frustrated with Mal and Alina's communication. I was giving me too much Sally Rooney vibe. Yeah, I think I would maybe go a little higher, like hard 3.5, maybe up to a 4, because I love Nikolai, which I'm sure we will get into.
Yes. Okay, so I never give my rating. This, for me, I don't know. I like the ending better than I like the beginning of this book. So like right now I'm all like high up on like I love the way this book ended. So I want to give it like a 4, but I know like realistically it probably is in the 3 range just because the beginning was so weak to me. But to give a summary for what happens in this part of the series, since everybody except for me and Hannah has read ahead, so we need to
we need to make sure no one
in this book we start with Alina and Mal. They're hiding out in a different country, and they're found immediately, like within the first chapter, by the Darkling. I'll get into how that made me feel. And then not really kidnaps them, but he like takes them forcefully onto a ship.
Pretty kidnappy.
We're not kids anymore. So I don't know about that. Like I just feel like anyway, we'll get into like the details of it later. So she ends up on a ship. The ship is run by this privateer called Sturmhond. I'm going to call him Nikolai because we all know he's Nikolai here. So Nikolai is running this ship. They're looking for the second, what are they called? Amplifiers, which is like this like dragon snake water creature. They find it, but also Nikolai betrays the Darkling and steals Alina and Mal away, and they run away back to Ravka, back to the palace, because he reveals to them he's actually a prince, and his scheme all along was to return with the Sun Summoner so that he eventually can take the throne, even though he's a second son. So they travel through the country, although we see none of the country because she spends the entire time in a fucking carriage again for the second time. And they end up at the palace. She becomes the leader of the Second Army. And she's working with Nikolai, trying to set up the palace so that they can defend themselves from the Darkling when he eventually returns. a whole bunch of drama happens, as has been said by other people. Mal and Alina are at odds during this entire time because of situations. Nikolai and Alina have a semi-romance that feels weird to me because it reads like friendship. We'll get into that as well. First Prince actually proposes to Alina at one point, which was great. And it all ends at a birthday party for Nikolai, where they realize that the elder brother, the First Prince, has fallen into a trap with the Darkling and let him into the country like an idiot. And everybody dies, but Alina and everybody who wears plot armor gets away at the end and ends up at like this church underground with the apparat who's been like sort of like lurking, who's been trying to talk to Alina. And yeah, that's like the very overall basic like summary.
The end also is when Alina realizes she can't use her powers,
anymore.
In case you guys have read forward and know what happens with that, don't tell us.
I remembered that part. Like as soon as we got to like the underground stuff, I was like, okay,
actually, that's the part that I was like, wait, when did this happen?
Yeah,
I remembered the part in the underground, but not the losing the power thing. I was like,
oh,
this is new information to me.
Interesting.
So, anyways, don't tell me. Just wanted to point that out.
Okay, so like the first question I had when I was like reading this book was, how was the beginning? Like, did you enjoy that we start this so abruptly that she is immediately brought back to the Darkling, that like there's no pause, there's no like recollecting yourself, especially if you're reading it in like a straight order like we are, you just are like immediately thrown back into everything. How did that vibe for y'all?
I was actually fine with it. I was like, yeah, let's get going. Only because it felt like it's such a short part, but that beginning part where they're in, I already forget the name of the other country that they've gone to, but like
Novi
Zem. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Also your lipstick is fantastic, Hannah. Just before but for me it was kind of like, I don't know, I care more about Alina than I do about Mal, and like you see Mal thriving in this place, but Alina's not because she's like scared to sun summon. And you're like, this, like for me, at least reading it, I was like, no, like, let's see her do something. So like having the Darkling come out and be like, I'm back, time to do your thing. It was much more like interesting and compelling to me. I'm like, okay, we're moving forward with the story. Like there feels like a very obvious arc that they like need to look for this next amplifier. Like, I don't know if there had been given more of like a refractory time for her and Mal to like have this like idea of happiness. Like, I don't know if it would have worked. Like, I don't think it would have been interesting, honestly, unless they decided to give Mal more personality. And two, I just think like it helped build a lot of that like unspoken discomfort between them that you see plays out, but for like the rest of the book, that's infuriating. But it, like, you see it begin there with her like feeling very out of place and very like simple next to him as he like seems to thrive around like social people. So I liked that it was like clipped quite short.
I'm of two minds about it. I do think the beginning and the ending were rushed. Like we kind of, like I knew, because I remembered how this book ended because it was involving Nikolai, and that part, it just imprints itself in my mind. I was like, I know everything that happens to Nikolai. So I knew how it ended, and I kept waiting for that to happen. I was like, are we literally like 30 pages away from the end and that's when everything happens? Like that I remember. And so the beginning and the end felt a little rushed, but I agree with Kiara that I don't know that I wanted. It just feels like, obviously, Bardugo's not interested in like delving into that. And my theory is because she knows Mal and Alina are not good together. And so she's like, let's not spend time thinking about that. And let's just skip to the like exciting stuff. That's my theory.
Alina's not good with anybody, let's be real. Like, there's no good choices for her
Alina
in the series.
just needs to be the queen of everyone, and just everyone needs to let her and just get out of her way. Like, that's my, yeah. But no, I think that the beginning would have been as infuriating as the rest of the book if we had stayed with it and watched Mal and Alina try to like, but also would that have been good in establishing that this is my agenda coming out now, so I'm just going to stop because I'm like, I don't know.
I feel like the problem for me is like, it's a like standard of writing, like you establish like the right now, right here. And I feel like we did not get that because she has like the first like prologue, which is just like the boy and the girl are on a ship. They end up in this place. And then like the first chapter we get like they're in this place we've never been to before. We sort of get some details about what this place is, and then suddenly they're gone. Like it just felt like there wasn't enough establishing. And I feel like that's just my problem with Leigh's writing in this series to begin with. Like I just said about the carriage when I'm crossing the country, which really fucking annoyed me. Like we got barely any new details about any place. Like we just went back to Little Palace and we get all these descriptions of Little Palace again and all of that stuff. But like the country itself is like, it's just a big blur of Ravka. Like we're supposedly fighting for this place we want to save, but what is this place that we want to save? I feel like that's where my struggle is with her and like the world building.
It's very clear what she cares about is like the politics. We get so much of that, and it's interesting. Like it's very clear that that's what she's actually interested in, because it's not skilled. We can see that she's very skilled at like doing things that she wants to do, but obviously she's like not interested in telling you about this country. You don't get to hear it. Let's just dive into like political machinations and everything.
Yeah, this felt like it was more, she's more interested in the relationship. So like let's get into that element of it, because I feel like that was a huge part of this book, was like how Alina was feeling about everybody around her. So the first new character we're introduced to is Nikolai, and by extension Tamara and Tulia. So like what did you think about like that crew and their introduction and like them in this book?
It was just like love at first sight, right? For I remember when I was first recommended this series, I was like a huge fan of the TV show Once Upon a Time, and my friend who liked this book series recommended it to me because she was like, when you get to book 2, there's a character who's like Hook from Once Upon a Time.
I was gonna say, is it Hook?
Very like charismatic, like a lot of that like pirate swagger, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna read to like get to find out who this is. And it was like you meet him and it's like instantly you're like, this is like a whole nother flavor of person compared to like all the other characters. And I think like he just had like his I think like his ego is so huge, and yet you were like still drawn to him, and at the same time I do enjoy the like reveal of him, because at first you are just like, especially when you're reading it for the first time, you're like, who the heck is this guy?
Are you?
Kira has something to say about this.
Oh, okay.
I already caught Paige on this thing. I feel like there's so much setup that like you're gonna find out that Nikolai is Nikolai, and I don't have receipts, but I just feel like the second they introduced his character, I was like, oh my god, it's the prince that went off to war and like fights in the Navy and like is like doing his thing. But
you're the only person. I'm convinced. Like I don't think I can't remember. It's been like so long since I read the original like for the first time. But he's only mentioned once in book 1, Kira. I swear he's mentioned
you're not reading carefully enough, Paige. I don't know.
No, I think he was mentioned more than once in the first book.
Thank you.
But I will say, it's not mentioned that often, but I will say that it was like when I first read it, I didn't connect the dots, but reading it now, I was like, oh, I see what she's doing. And I didn't like, I when I first read it, I didn't think that it was him. I was surprised to find that out. But,
I only remember he's called Puppy. And like the whole like he's a bastard, that was like in one scene. Like it was multiple times in one scene.
But it was given quite a bit of time, like for something that's so in like Vasily. We never hear about him except for like
you also got a bunch of
barely hear about Vasily
throwaway details about like why he wasn't there. Like he's the queen's favorite. He's a bastard. They call him this little puppy. He ended up leaving the palace to like go be part of the army, but actually they think he's in the Navy. And I'm like, why are you telling us this in book 1? Like, what's this? Where are we going with this? So then I feel like as soon as they got on this boat and they were like all these like wolf connections, I was like, well, this man's face isn't right.
Okay, that was the thing we were talking about earlier, is like every other line was like, his face looks weird. Those like features don't look like they belong together. He holds himself a certain way. And it's like, she's not being subtle when she's writing it, and you reread it, you're like, oh, like very obviously this is.
That's why I was like, when I was rereading it, I was like, oh yeah, like this was so obvious. But I wasn't smart enough to put the dots together.
I wasn't paying attention.
The first time I was reading it.
Clearly Kira's superior. Okay. She got it from first read.
I read the book in like 2 days. So back to back, I was like, it has to be.
The other thing is we were all just coming off of the high and like the reveal about the Darkling. Like that's the thing. When we first read it, like everyone, and including myself, was like, Team Darkling, it's great. And then we're like, what? Like Pikachu face at the Darkling being the Darkling, whose name is the Darkling, being a bad person. And then coming off of that, I think we were all just not expecting that there would be a third person. Well, I agree with you that their relationship is not a romantic relationship. But
he's just like so
when
sweet.
you're first
so
reading
good.
it,
like you want him to be the person she chooses because he, like I was saying, like during like our like Instagram when we like update people when we were reading it, which was chaotic. I was saying like Nikolai feels so similar to the Darkling to me because he's ambitious. He wants power. He doesn't say like why he wants to be king other than he likes fixing things, and he's like he has good intentions compared to the Darkling who just is like genocidal, has taken it a little too far. It's fine, but like you want him to be the right choice because he's offering Alina the same thing. He's offering her power. He's offering her to step into who she is, like who she can become. But like reading this, I just know like this isn't what Alina wants ultimately.
It wasn't written,
so
I don't think it was written. Even when I first read it, and I mean we're drifting away a little bit from what we're trying to talk about, but even when I first read this book, I think when we were doing the tag in our intro video, I said that I don't know what I would say for Alina, but I like the Darkling, and that's because Alina doesn't fit with any of these people. She doesn't need them. She's like, this is what pisses me off about this series. Alina just needs to be on her own. I didn't read that comment, but whatever.
They were just agreeing with Kira about they knew it was different.
Anyways, so back to the reveal of Nikolai, because I think who didn't speak?
That was me.
Yeah.
I had a similar experience to Kira. I don't think I figured it out as early as she did, because I think I just went so fast through the first book that I was like, okay, Prince stuff gets okay, whatever. Like back to the main stuff, that I didn't absorb it as much. But I definitely knew, like, as soon as they were getting off the boat and he had like a military thing on and he looked a little different and she kept commenting about his face, I was like, oh, it's for sure Nikolai. And then it happened. And then I just like remember thinking that all the other characters were taking so long to figure this out, and couldn't you just please catch up?
I liked Nikolai as a character because like obviously he's like everything you expect like this kind of character to be. He's like smart, he's like witty, he has like all the good one-liners that make you laugh during like any serious situation. But like at the same time I was like not as impressed with him as I was the first time around, and I think it's because he's such like a stereotypical kind of like trope of way at the time. Like he was so charming the first time, and this time I'm like, okay, yes, I get like what character you're trying to play, but you're not offering me nuance or like conflict. You're just like good with a little bit of moral grayness when you're like, I don't know if I would give you up for power. Like I don't know if I would lead you to the gallows if it meant I could be king. That was the one moment I was like, okay, I like this scene. Otherwise I was just like, okay, he's Nikolai.
I think what I liked about him that was like beyond the trope that's very charming and like you're laughing as you read, and him being a pirate, because that's amazing. Love pirates. That's something. I think it's kind of like what Yash's comment that was just up speaks to, is like you watch this partnership between him and Alina begin to build, where he like very much comes through to support her power in a way that like doesn't make her feel bad about it. Whereas I feel like with Mal and with the Darkling, there are these like conflicts she has where like with Mal she feels bad about her power because she feels it takes her farther from him, but with the Darkling, when she uses her power, like she knows he wants to use it for bad. So I feel like you get this kind of like partnership between her and Nikolai that continues to build on like both of their best, like the best things about them, which is why like throughout it I was like, I want this to work, but obviously like this isn't what Alina wants. Like this is someone who she sees as like an amazing friend and like an equal in a way that's like to achieve a goal. But I think that's why I liked him beyond just like the charm and like the vibe, was that he provides like these opportunities for Alina to like come into her own like properly and like take on like the little palace and like really be in charge of something there, and like gives her a chance to like kind of start harnessing her own power and like be that like really powerful, amazing woman that like we want her to be in the first book.
Yeah, I think it's him being like against Mal, being like, oh, he's like, he doesn't belong here. I think that's what rubbed me wrong, is when he's like, oh, he's a peasant.
right, though.
He doesn't.
Like,
But it was so classist that I was like, I can't deal with Nikolai right
oh,
now.
I didn't read the classist on his comments. I read the classist in Zoya's comments, which is why I'm still.
Oh, so
I don't know why I love Zoya.
I love Zoya.
I know in my heart that I like her. I don't know why though, and now I'm like, why do I? Was I wrong? Anyways,
Zoya is the like resident mean girl of the series in the first in this entire trilogy. But
I think maybe the next book will illuminate to me why I liked her so much the last time I read this book.
I was like, wait, she's not good yet? I thought like in the second one she started like endearing herself, but then she do like one thing where she like shows a little bit of vulnerability, and then she's just rude and kisses Mal and all this other shit when he's fighting. And I was like,
well, she's like, I'm on the good side, but that doesn't mean I have to like you, Alina.
I do like that about her. I just didn't like the classist comments. That was the thing that rubbed me the wrong way about her. So I will say, even though I do read quite a bit of YA fantasy, I know that when I first read this series, I was I wasn't reading as much as I was starting and then putting away books a lot. So I don't find that this character is actually that prevalent. So because I just haven't read that many, because it got too white for me. YA fantasy was too white for me. Just say it and I picked the cream of the crop. So this was the one I was like, okay, I'm gonna read this, and then I'm not gonna bother with all these the same thing over and over again.
I kind of agree with you there. I feel like I see Mal as a type of character a lot more often in fantasy books than I do see Nikolai.
The smart ass speaking literally every Cassandra Clare book.
But I hate Cassandra Clare books. So
that's like every fucking character from Cassandra Clare is like Nikolai, and I'm like, okay, that's why I'm like, okay, whatever.
With Nikolai, I don't think it's just that I disagree that he has nothing more. I think he's the second son who's been kind of told he could go and live his life and be happy and don't bother us. But he's like, well, I'm good at this though, so why shouldn't I be the one in charge if I can actually do it? Whereas you would probably, Vasily, would probably have been better off being the second son. And Nikolai, it's him going against the destiny that was written for him. That's what I like, and him being so good at it and being so smart. And I wrote in my notebook, the downfall of smart people is always stupid people with power. It's just that. And so I think that whole thing, I just love that he's so smart and so resourceful, and is not going to let the fact that his place in society or what expectations are placed on him stop him from doing what he knows he can be good at. That's what I kind of really like about his character.
Go ahead, Elsie.
I just I truly think that he is a really good politician, and that even though he doesn't have as much of a claim to the throne, he's I actually would be the best man for the job. But I have a parallel to propose to the group. But is he almost if Prince Harry was a bastard son?
And let's not get into the whole rumor mill of that situation either, because that's a whole. See, that's the thing is, I feel because I gravitate towards these kinds of stories, which are political intrigue, courtly intrigue, these kinds of. I've read the second son story before, so for me it doesn't hit as hard, because I feel it's a very common even if it's instead of it being a second son, it's actually the daughter who can't do it. These kinds of stories are actually really common in that. So I feel that's probably just for me reading this. It's such a classic YA, but it doesn't hit any less. It's I still really fucking enjoyed reading this, and Nikolai is still obviously the better person for the throne. It's just he's just a little BB, not as hard-hitting as however a 21-year-old me thought when I first read the series. But what about Tolia and Tamara? Were you surprised when you found out that they were sun summoner?
We talk about fate the whole time. The whole time. They wouldn't stop. They say the exact line Rasputin Apparat Man says in the first book to her, in the early chapters.
Yeah, so Tamar, I think, says something like that.
Whatever that line is about faith, that the Apparat says multiple times in the first book, one of the twins, I think it's actually Tolia, says to her at one point. And
then him trying to hide the tattoos. I was I remembered when I read, when I saw them, I was oh yes, I remember how this goes. But also him trying to hide the tattoos from her, him being able to read the Bible thingy and translate it to her perfectly. All these things, I was and then them not being there, and also Mal just fucking up massively
Poor
there.
Mal.
He's the worst. He's the worst. I'm sorry, but I'm not
He's
sorry.
not the worst. He's also there. You have to remember they're like 17 years old in this, so we can't hold them.
They're like 19, aren't they? Because
Are
they were
they? I
18
thought
in
they
the
were
last book.
17. Did they have a birthday?
I think they said that they were
Has
18.
enough time passed for a birthday?
Oh, fair enough.
Only Nikolai gets a birthday.
Only Nikolai got older.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's my thing was like they're being fucking Mal, but they're kids. I kept saying like they're kids. They're kids. They're dumb, but they're kids, and I'm not gonna judge them for it. But what about you, Anais? I feel like you're the other person who's not read it for the first. Like you're reading it for the first time. Did you know Toya and Tamara were? So
I had no idea. I think the same thing happened with like the hints about Nikolai in the first book. Like I was so misdirected by like the large plot points that I was really not picking up on the small stuff because I just wanted to find out what happened. But also I think like had I read the because I was just getting used to like her writing style, so had I read like the Six of Crows duology first, like you did, Paige, I probably would have like picked up on the little stuff that happens a lot more because she does that a lot more in that duology, and I guess like I would have got used to the idea that like everything means something, which I wasn't sure about at first.
Yeah, I feel like like it was just I forgot until about halfway through, and then I was like, oh wait a minute, I think they're actually religious and they worship her. Yeah, it wasn't until they saved her from the pilgrims that I was like, okay, for sure, this is definitely I'm correct. Like my brain remembers this one part, but like I completely wasn't paying attention to like I just remember them saying they were like faithful, but I didn't think anything of it. I was just like, okay, they practice religion at some point, and then
when Tamar lets him go at that point, like Tamar's so good,
okay,
she would have caught him.
That was like the whole situation is like that happened, and then she got upset about something, and then she like went for her little walkie walk right out of the
That's
city.
True, yeah,
which was so was such a stressful scene to like read.
I was like,
just,
you
like,
know it's
into
gonna
the
go
throes
bad,
of
like
people who are,
you
like,
dummy.
Worshipping her,
And she basically is like, just let him kill me. Why not at this point? She just like, take me. Let end this. And I was like, okay.
We've all wanted to be ripped apart by pilgrims. Come on. Have a good day.
I know what kind of life you lead.
Yeah, like what did you think about like that the element that Leigh's bringing in about like religion in YA fantasy world building? Like have you read other stories where I feel like it's very rare to see actual like religious elements weaved into the lack of world building in terms of like place setting, but religion it's there.
I thought it was interesting, and not just because of like the religious part of it, but more so I was thinking about just like how society or the community has like put Alina on this like pedestal that she's never asked or felt worthy to be put on, and yet it's completely out of her control that people are perceiving her in this way and like attributing all these things to her and calling her a saint, and she's like the most reluctant saint, like chosen one ever. and I think it's a really interesting, I think, commentary just on almost like celebrity worship in some ways too.
The only other book that I read this recently, so it's fresh in my mind, that kind of delves into like religion and that kind of thing, is Rena Barron's Kingdom of Souls. And I think the new book, actually, the second book just came out, or is coming out this week or something. But that one kind of talks about religion a little bit and how politics and religion intermingle. I don't think one of the things that I remember the most about this book is that element of that story. So I don't think that any other books that I've read play with it as much as Bardugo does in this one. So.
Yeah, I thought it was like when I heard like it was in a very brief passing when it was like, oh, the apparat's like spreading the word about Alina. I was like, that is politically a great strategy because there's nothing like some like hope to give to the people for something to fight against the Darkling with, and she is that for him. She's like a pawn in his scheme of like how he wants to be the religious leader and is waiting for her to die. We like hear like at
but
the
then
end.
At the end, yeah, I was like, he doesn't want her alive.
He doesn't want her alive. He wants a martyr to like lead the people. And I'm just like, it's like a really interesting introspection, like look at religion and how people often use it for a political agenda and like for power. And I just, so well done. Just tell me what places look like when you pass through them, please, Leigh. And it would be a perfect book.
Hey,
I'm not like this girl. Let me see what other questions I have.
Places look like. That's hilarious.
Seriously. So shipping situations, since you were talking about Nikolai, Mal, let's talk about Mal. Give me your worst. Let's discuss.
Okay, so let me give you my thesis statement. When we ended Shadow and Bone, I was like, Mal is the worst and Alina doesn't need him and she should go. At the end of this book, I was like, both of you are so bad for each other, even though Mal is still the worst. Alina's also kind of shitty to Mal in this book, like so many parts in this book. And Nikolai, I think, says it at one point where he's like, what do you want him to just stay here and like wither away worshiping you when he clearly needs a purpose and needs to be able to do something? So the two of them together, set aside my feelings about Mal, which are that he's the worst. The two of them together are like trauma bonded, and like the only thing they know of like community and life is each other. And so now they're like, we just have to stay together regardless of how bad this is. And I just think that's bad. That's codependency. Like putting my psych degree to use here. This is codependency. Y'all need to be separated and live your lives alone. And then maybe if life brings you back together, maybe. But this is just, it's so unhealthy and it's so infuriating reading it throughout the book. Like when Alina's happy and like having a good time, succeeding like with the bowls and the mirrors, and then he comes in like being a jerk and she's like, oh, now I'm depressed again. It's like, fucking Mal. Like, and then he is the same way. Like he's found this very unhealthy coping mechanism, but like a coping mechanism nonetheless. And then she comes in and she's like, why are you kissing someone and coping for like what I've done to you? And it's like, just please stop.
Yeah, I like, they're not healthy for each other, but like in terms of, I see what like Leigh's trying to do, because if there's somebody who's going to be there for Alina and not ask anything of her other than for her to be herself, which is like limiting her, which is the whole problem I had with him in the first book. He literally
does not want her to be herself.
Let me speak, please, ma'am.
so
He is the only person who would willingly, without a doubt, stop what he was doing, even if he thinks it's a bad idea for Alina. And I think that's what she's been weaving throughout all of the books so far. He literally deserted knowing he could die and be killed, even though he didn't have to do that. Would Nikolai do that for her? No. But Darkling isn't even an option. He's just over. He's over there for me in the corner for later. But like between Nikolai and Mal in this book, I was just like, they're not in a good place right now. They're never going to be in a good place because they're in the middle of a war, and like they're not, like there's no happy ending for them in this series. I don't even remember how this series ends, but he's the only person.
I do, and I'm pissed about it. That's why this whole thing is pissing me off. I remember exactly how it ends.
Okay, interesting. Well, like I was just like, I can't put what I would do if I was Alina in that situation. I would want the power. I would want to be with Nikolai. I cannot put that on her. She doesn't want this. Like she wants the power now, but she doesn't want to be queen. She doesn't want the ambitious element of the power. She wants the Grisha power and just that. She just wants to be herself. And Mal would let her ultimately do that if it meant that she wasn't like part of the courts and stuff, I think.
But like Dulcie said, like everyone else in this series, Mal has this idea of who Alina is, and he wants her to be that person. He says to her, he's like, why can't we be common together? And she's like, when she was being common, she was hurting herself because she was restraining her power because she doesn't want to be separated from him. That's not healthy. That's
valid.
not healthy. Like she's not herself when she's with him. She's who he thinks. Like he has this version of her in his mind, which is the version of her that she's created when she thought that she would be separated from him. So that's who he's in love with, and that's who he wants to like give everything to. But that's not who she is. I'm not saying who she is as a queen or like the leader of the Second Army or whatever. But I don't think like, okay, I have my sticky notes on here. The first half of the book, when she first gets her power, these are the blue parts. These are parts when Alina's like happy and like super thrilled about who she's being and how the power makes her feel. And then at every single point, right after that like moment when she's like, I'm powerful and I love my power, he comes in and like ruins it for her. And I'm like, fuck you, like leave her alone. Like, again, not saying that Nikolai is the one for her or the Darkling, but I don't think Mal is either, and I don't think
anybody. I feel like I like him because he will do anything for her. Like that's it.
That's another way to control people. If you're like, I would do everything for you, why can't you love me?
Oh, not like with the love relationship. I just mean like I know for a fact out of everybody, he would like do whatever it took for her. I'm not saying in the shipping sense. I just mean like I respect him more this book than I did last book. Because like everybody
so
wants
to that point, I agree. Yes, because I did at the end of the last book. I was like, throw it into the garbage.
I didn't understand why they were together. Like in the first book, I was like, I don't understand why people. But now I'm like, okay, I sort of get it. But everybody wants something from her. Like nobody belongs with her. Leave Alina alone is basically my shit.
That's my okay. We've talked a lot about everybody else.
Talking to me and Hannah have like argued this out.
Like we'll fight through this.
If I can jump in, like I do agree that there is quite a lot of examples of like codependency, and that Mal is like in love with a version of Alina that is no longer true or is not the current version of Alina. But my argument for Mal, because I think like when I was reading it the second time and reading the second book, I was like, Mal is endgame. I just see Mal and Alina. Nikolai was like, I think in my head, I was like, that would make sense because that's like a marriage of like politics and like it would just be necessary. I would be fine with that. But obviously they don't love each other. But then with Mal, I think it takes a long time, but I think towards the like end of the book, Mal is starting to let go of who he thought Alina was, like that old image of Alina, because they show different like sort of vignettes of him sort of like starting to get to know the other Grisha like soldiers and like starting to like I think just like accept this like Grisha world that he was quite like averse to in the beginning. Like he like thought that it was like really like he wasn't like a super fan of all of the magic and the power that these people had. And now I think he opens himself up a little bit more to that, and in turn is then like accepting more of who Alina is now. And then I will also agree with Paige that I think Mal is just like incredibly like loyal. Like his heart is like loyal to Alina, and like everything else could fall away, but like he will be loyal to Alina to the end. And for that, I think that's something that is it's not super unique because you do have like Tamar and Tolia, but they're loyal in like a religious way, so that's like a different vibe. But anyways,
I will just say
Mal, and I will plant that flag.
He does say like, okay,
you're my country, my nation, my whatever. I hated that line.
I was literally about to say that because that is when he won me over. I was like, okay, you're the one.
Oh, that's when I was like, this is a bad relationship. We had a very different reaction to that line. Sorry, Anais, you were going to say something.
I was just going to say that that's also why I like Mal. Like, I think in this whole new world, like, we've never seen anyone else that Alina can count on in the same way. And that's sort of why, like, everything that happens with them in this book really annoyed me. But I think that it really was necessary to kind of, like, give depth to Mal and to also kind of make that relationship a little bit more earned. Like, they're like, this part seems the most real to me, where they were both like testing their boundaries and also thinking about themselves a little bit more, and then trying to like grapple with how that had an effect on their relationship, like a pretty shitty one. So I think like at the end, I always shipped Mal, but like I think that that's where he's different than Nikolai, is because even though Alina and Nikolai like have like a kind of deep respect for one another and like this strong bond, she, I think at the end of the day, knows that he wouldn't always have her back under any circumstances if he thought that it could like better his chances at being king or at like solidifying things for Ravka.
A dog is barking and I'm very confused about if it's my dog or not. Sorry. What about you, Kira? What are your thoughts on
Mal?
Mm-hmm. Let him out.
I'm still here for the Mal Alina like relationship. I think I found it really, really frustrating because it felt so much like when I was talking about Sally Rooney earlier. Like I feel like there's so many moments where like if they just had a conversation, like they could like be fine. Like the thing that's like causing him to go like fight Grisha in the dungeon pit, whatever, or like do like the nonsense stuff that he's doing because he's like a man who's not allowed to talk about his feelings. Like, I don't know. And like for her too, like where she's like really freaking out because she's getting all those like hallucinations of the Darkling. And she's like, I could never tell Mal, he would freak out. And it's like, yeah, he probably would. But like, if your relationship can't withstand this, then like y'all can split up now and like go have your lives. So that like, there's so many points where I was just like, just say how you feel. Just tell them. They're like, and it's so funny the way that like Leigh writes it, because she very much would be like, right after a Darkling moment, she'd be like, Alina just couldn't tell Mal. Like, there's no way she could ever, like, plays into the fact that it's like this terrible secret that can't be communicated, and then you see how it unravels the communications between them. But yeah, I think like they both at the beginning of not the beginning, like all of the first book, you're getting like Alina simping so hard for Mal, like saving him in the fold, and then like saving him at the end again in the fold, and them running off together, and to finally see that becoming reciprocated by Mal in equal measure started to feel like certain things. Oh my god, yeah, so annoying. Made me want to scream. That was the comment, that she wouldn't talk to like Mal about it. But yeah, I think like you finally start to see that reciprocated, and you get to see like Mal start to like really simp over Alina, and I'm like, okay, you're getting this give and take, which I think in like real relationships, like you do see there are times where like one person is doing really, really well, and like the other person might not be doing as well, and like I think it's like part of a growing pains of a relationship. So I was like, I was here for it. There are things that were super frustrating, obviously, as I've expressed, but I was still like okay with it.
Yeah,
so I would have like really been okay with her going with for Nikolai too, for the chaos. For the fun.
I don't want that for Nikolai. He deserves better. Like she said that, like he said to her, I don't want to kiss you while you're thinking about all these other guys. And I was like, yeah. That's when I started thinking Alina's also toxic, when she was like, okay, let me kiss you now. And he's like, excuse me, ma'am, no.
For some reason my brain is like Zolia and Nikolai. I don't know if that's a thing that happens. Don't tell me.
I feel like that's the thing that happens in the Nikolai series.
It just makes sense with their personalities. I'm like, something there. Yeah. Anyway, I wanted to bring up this comment from earlier before we started. It happened right when we were starting to talk about Mal. But this is a really good point. I think like Anais has more context because you've read the duology now. Yeah, like this is like part of the fault of the world building being so shitty in this first trilogy in terms of like all of the periphery and how people are treated. And like there's one comment that was brought up, like I put it in my phone notes or whatever. It's when Nikolai was talking about the Zemeni like gunsmiths and said they're barbaric or something, but they know their way around a gun. And I was like, Leigh, this is messy, this is not good. And like that is it's part of the world building before I don't think she was really considering.
I have a note in my journal about the messed up world building stuff that I hated. The slavery mentioned at the beginning, biggest pet peeve that I have with fantasy novels and just fantasy in general, is the inclusion of slavery to show that something is bad. It's like, you can do it some other way. Like, stop throwing slavery as if it's just so easy to like throw that in there and move on past it. It pisses me off so much, and every time I see it, I just want to like throw a book away. So that one. Then the fat phobia that just continues. I'm like, like what the hell are you doing? And the Suli thing, I was like, and it wasn't just that one comment, it was a few things where they were like, the accents, I was like,
yes, the accents when they were making fun of the
please stop. And then the classism plays into it as well with like some race. It's just, there's parts of it like that I was just like, this is messy and fucked up world building things that I don't love about this series, and they are indicative of the time in which it's written, but still, I think those are honestly the things that were kind of putting me off of YA fantasy back when I was like reading a lot of it, and like, and I haven't realized it until recently. Like, why have I started coming back to it? It's because I'm reading YA fantasy by writers of color. Back then, it was mostly white writers who were doing questionable shit like this.
Yeah, literally when I read like the
Yeah.
when I hadn't read like when I read the like Zemeni like gunsmith comment, I had to like go back to the map and be like, wait, what's this world building that she is like doing? And also part of it is like the way the world is built is like people of color are very specifically segregated into certain countries, and I'm like, that is saying something about your inherent world building that you decided that this is where you're gonna
Tolia and like Tamar, or Tolia and Tamar, and like how they talk so much about their like
shoe heritage when they're half Ravkan. I'm like, they're half,
and like
why?
Being like, their eyes look like this, and I'm like, okay.
Or the one fabricator who is Ravkan but also Suli, and they kept commenting on her being Suli, and it's like, she's Ravkan too. Like, why are you being so weird about this? Like, stop it. And then she dies. Like, she's one of the first people to die. Like, okay, like
you've set this like world in Ravka where like obviously for the most part your characters are very white and white presenting, and like people who are outliers or strange have these like are half Ravkan or like have these kind of like foreign identities that then make them like unique and like mysterious. And I'm like, are we doing this? I guess
and
it was
not one of us. It's the not one of us of it. Even though we clearly, every time we get introduced to these characters, they're obviously Ravkan, even if they do have a multicultural identity. They're clearly Ravkan, and yet they're like pushed, and their other identity is the only identity that we're focused on for the entire duration of the book. And I'm like I even forgot that Tolia and Tamar are Ravkan.
Yeah,
until I read that part, and I was like, oh right, their mom was Ravkan. Like,
because she leans in so hard to the otherness as like, I think it's like, maybe it's like a laziness thing of like white YA writers being like, this makes someone interesting. They're not totally white. So now they're in it. They're complex now. And I'm like, no, you have to like write a character. Like, you can't do
Yeah. No, I'm curious to reread like Six of Crows to see how like my reading, because like I was a very different reader back when I was reading this series originally. I feel like I wasn't as critical as I am now. So knowing some of the characters and identities that are part of that duology, I'm like, am I gonna be good with this? We'll see. It'll come up.
Honestly, I think. Go ahead, Dulcie.
Oh, I think Leigh Bardugo is like, she's very aware of the traps and stereotypes that she played into in this original series. And I think that this series benefits from reading it in publication order. Compared to if you did do it the other way around and did the Six of Crows duology first, then I think like it would probably be really jarring to go back and read the original trilogy and be like, what is this?
Yeah, because that's what I did.
Yeah,
I read the duology first.
I agree. I think like I would attribute it to like a lack of world building that prevents you from seeing the other cultures as real people. I felt that way with the Fjordans in the original like first book. It just, I don't remember the exact words, but it was like quite like the terms that she used were quite, I think, attached to like, I think she used like savages or something, which is like a very loaded term, especially with like native peoples of a land. And I was like, what does this mean? Because you know nothing else about Fjordans except that they had just attacked her carriage that I know Paige doesn't like, that she was locked in this entire
carriage. Just ban carriages.
And that's like, if that's the only thing you know about that culture, and nobody from that culture is also a part of like your playing cast, then like you are gonna see them with just their stereotypes and just their like one way that they've been presented, which then comes off quite problematic.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah. All of that. Wow, look at us pulling something so deep to discuss from this trilogy. Are there any other characters that you guys like that we were introduced to that are new besides the trio that I talked about earlier? I truly still don't understand the Zolia fascination that I had. What does she do in book 3 that really wins me over? Well, what did you think about Jenya's like reveal as being the ruined?
Oh my gosh, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah,
that was a choice on her part to like.
I was still mad at her. Loyalty
at Jenya,
at Jenya, being like, I don't know the loyalty stuff, but she definitely wins a lot more respect back in this book for me. Like, I feel like she makes a bit more of like a comeback, but still mad about the first book.
I don't quite understand why she didn't go with them when they offered.
Yeah,
like,
that was a weird.
I was disappointed and heartbroken when she betrayed Alina in the first book, but I completely I understood, because where she is being sexually assaulted by this all-powerful man, and this other all-powerful man is like, I can save you from that life. I would go with the person who can save me from that life, even if it means betraying. Like, she's being sexually assaulted and harassed on the daily. That makes sense. But in this book, when she's like, I guess it would have meant that she would have to go back to the king. Maybe she recognized, I don't know. But like, I just was like, why wouldn't you go? The Darkling's clearly not going to like forgive you for this.
I had a break brain moment just now. She is she alters people's appearances. Do you think she knew
maybe
Sturmon's face wasn't like, do you think she had inklings and that's why she didn't do it? Because she's like, she knew he probably is Nikolai and is going to take her back to the king. Like, I feel like I was just thinking about it. I'm like, because if Alina could tell that his face was fucked, she definitely probably knew he had somebody on board doing that to him. Like, I feel like she would recognize the work. I don't know. I feel like she's smart enough, and that's probably a reason she would stay behind.
That would make sense. I wish that was like
written into it better if it actually was the case.
That would make sense if she knew who he was and where they were going. That would make sense.
But I think also her motivations are like explained a little bit more in the third book. Like, I still remember being really salty in the second because I just wanted Genya to be good, and I was so mad about what she had done still. But I think her story arc is really like overarching in the series, and book 3 really kind of ties a lot of that stuff together for her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I also, for some reason, in the first book, I thought that the reason part of the reason was for David. She was worried about him, but that doesn't seem like that is the case, because it was like, David's still here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for some reason I thought they were together. Like, I didn't realize that he was back at Little Palace until he was there, and I was like, wait, my brain just remembers them always together. But I guess
that's what I thought too. I thought that they went with the Darkling together, and that was like part of it was to get away from the king, but also to be with David. And like, since David was the one doing the collar, I thought that he was. Anyways, I guess he returned back to the palace at some point.
Interesting. Yeah. Does anybody have anything like they want to ask us in the comments? / does anybody here have anything they want to discuss that I have not brought up yet, because I've been so heated about the triangle of relationships and carriages?
I wanted to bring up the politics and the sexism that Alina faces. That was something that I thought was, I wish we'd actually spent more time with it. I think there's a part when she says, do you think the Darkling had duchesses like propositioning him? I wish we'd seen more of that. And and also like the way the Grisha also kind of were like, who are you? Like, go away. Part of it, I do think, for the Grisha is that they literally just watched her become a Grisha like a few months ago. So that is, but I think there's a bit of like the sexism aspect of it too. And that was interesting for me to watch that happen. And I wish we'd kind of, again, explored that more fully on the page, other than like me kind of thinking about it on my own.
That's really fair, because I think at every time that Alina and the Darkling confront each other, it's like proven how Alina can match him like turn for turn. Mm-hmm. And yet the other Grisha like have doubts in her and things like that. And yeah.
To be fair to them, in the beginning, they didn't see they haven't seen the battle or any of the ways in which she kind of took him on. Like, the people who were in the palace hadn't seen that. But even Nikolai, and the way he was kind of like everyone kind of treated Alina like this like little like, and that's kind of what frustrates me about this series. I think I said last time that I was projecting what I want of Alina, but I don't think so, because I think there's enough in these books to show that Alina is strong enough and capable enough to like stand on her own and tell all these people to fuck off. And yet we just don't go there. And if I remember correctly from the third book, we never fully get there, and that's what pisses me off.
I mean, I really enjoyed the like final confrontation in this book between the Darkling and Alina, Like that's one of my favorite scenes in the entire
And now
thing. Like
fucks
she
it
like
up.
explodes a chapel, and like she's like using the small parts of the Darkling that is in her to like then attack the Darkling. I think that was so genius and was just so incredible. And like, because this entire time you're told that she like controls light and summons light and things like that, and then it's like, oh, she can like do the flip side too and get like harness that like kind of creepy dark energy too. And I really enjoyed that.
And who ruins that?
Okay,
I'm just
but
gonna-
like, would you rather have her done the thing that is always happening in fantasy where women sacrifice themselves in their lives?
I mean, I believe in Alina being powerful enough to survive it, but I mean, we never get to see that.
But I like that whole like end scene. I was telling Anais and Kira earlier, like the scene where he comes and like there's mass slaughter was really well written. Like Leigh really like leaned into everything with her descriptions of everything that was happening that made you like go, oh shit, like this is serious. Like everybody's literally dead in the worst way possible. So like that entire ending, even though it was very out of nowhere, I really enjoyed the writing that was happening and like the way she was able to describe and ground you in every situation. You were never confused about the fighting that was happening.
Yeah,
it's like such a small part of the book, like in terms of pages, but then my memory, it takes up so much space.
Same, because as I was reading, I was like, I know this happened. Why is it taking so long to get there? But what I do think is well done is that it took that happening. It took a massacre happening for people to believe Alina when she's been telling them from the beginning, we're not ready for when the Darkling comes. Like, we're not ready. We need. And nobody, including the Grisha, nobody fully believed her until they all died in front. Like it took that long. And but that's another thing on the commentary about the sexism. Like she told y'all, and nobody fucking believed her. And then they all died for it. So I guess, good job.
Part of that though has so much to do with like the like underlying politics of like Grisha being weaponized for like Ravka, and the Darkling always, or at least like in the memory of the Grisha that are there now, like the Darkling is this person who shows that like Grisha don't have to be othered, I guess, and also like has like created a framework for Grisha to like move into like what would feel like a more elite lifestyle. Like we get like points of different backstories of how like Grisha children like are ostracized and like treated poorly until they get to the Grisha school where they're like given some respect and like have like lives begin to build for themselves. And I think if you're looking at it from the perspective of like, yes, Alina's here, like being like, he's bad, we need to prepare. You have like all this history, which I wish they had gone into more of like the Darkling being set up as like this person who is going to like bring the Grisha up and like give them the opportunities that they wouldn't have in Ravka otherwise. And like you hear about how like Grisha gets, I think this goes back to what you're saying about the slavery stuff, Hannah, like how Grisha gets sold in other countries.
Sold into slavery, carved up and their bones used, all these things.
Yeah.
And that's part of, I think someone in the last live show was saying, we don't really get why you all love the Darkling. The fact that whether it's, and I think part of it is genuine, but also recognizing that like, that most of the people in his second army are coming from that and using that to his advantage. That's kind of what I think is fascinating about his character. I do think he's like overcorrecting, but I do think he actually is trying to like address this really fucked up system. And like we see it with Vasily too, not just the Grisha, because like Vasily says, let's start drawing 12-year-olds into the army if we're having like the people who aren't the nobility and the ones who aren't controlling the state mean nothing. And they're just basically fodder for like these big nations and the wars that they're all fighting. So that was.
But like even Nikolai falls into that sometimes. Like even though you see him on his crew and he has Grisha there, he asks Alina to give him to Grisha, like their gifts, and
I
remind him that like they're people, they can volunteer, but I'm not giving you like. So like I feel like it's just like part of the world building. Like that is part of like. That instead of focusing on like the race elements that she's added to the story, like with the way she's done like the different countries, she was trying to display like the relationship between like whatever the name is for the people who have no powers, which I still do not remember.
Yes,
and the Grisha. So she was trying to show like it through that, but then she didn't realize like you're adding all these other elements at play as well when you're using these other countries and these other people as part of your role building.
Totally.
This is part of why I do like Alina though. Like even though I'm frustrated, she's always like looking out for the people who have no one else to look out for them, whether it's Grisha who are being like traded off, like fabricators who no one seems to appreciate, and she's like, these guys are really good at what they're doing, or whether it's the like people, the pilgrims, or whether like she's always looking out for those people. And that's why I think she should just take over the throne, kick everybody out, and become like she would be so good at it. Like
I don't think we'll ever get like Alina though, like showing a true desire for power for that role.
I know. Like she wants to make people live better, but she doesn't want to like,
But like, does she actually truly want that for herself? Like, I don't know. I never read that from like the way she gets written, even though all her actions show that she's like more than capable 100 times over to be like a champion of people in like every.
Yeah, that is true. She never, and she does say, I think at one point, she says.
Yeah, to Vasily when he proposes, he's like, I'm the only one that can make you a queen. And she's like, I don't have those ambitions. She does.
Yeah, and like, not even that. I think there's another point where she's like just thinking, and she's like, I don't want this, but this is the power and the part that I have, and I should use it for good. And it's clear that she doesn't want this life. But also it's clear that, and anyways, I'm very frustrated about Alina. I wanted to mention one thing, and that is the Morozova Mystery, which is I'm pretty sure I know exactly how it ends, but I thought we would get more of it in this book, and I'm disappointed that we didn't get more of it in this book, because like there was a bit with Bagra talking about it.
The seeds. I think she's planting the seeds.
It's definitely the seeds,
but it has to fit in her like 3-act structure of a series that you need like one amplifier per book. So
yeah. Yeah, for how much the snake is like all over the cover, it's literally like just the
3
first
seconds
pages or something.
I found that was something that like struck me as a little bit odd about this book, is that you get the amplifier like right out of the gate, and you're like, mythical creature that's dead, and no more of that. And I was like, oh,
I didn't even clock the book cover design until y'all just said
even this one, the old one, it's like the snake, it's like all over.
Yeah, like I'm assuming, because I think the first book has the stag on it, and this one has this, and that one, the third one probably has the fucking bird, and I just have never noticed that. Cool.
Book design, y'all.
But then, to be fair, in this book, the next thing we see is the palace, which is where we spend a lot of our time.
Well, okay, literally the only 2 places to exist are the fold and the palace. Nothing else exists in this country.
If I can make a recommendation of like the Lives of Saints like little book that they're like each like story is a couple of pages, but it's like on all the different like saints that exist, and Morozova's in this as well. And it's not that it adds a whole nother layer or something, but it's just really interesting to see like all these other saints who have died very bloody deaths and things like that.
It helps us understand what the opera wants to happen to Alina. Die already, damn it! Like, why are you still alive? I bet you he was hoping she was dead, and then when she came back, damn it.
So see, I feel like The Lives of Saints, I don't know if anyone else has read it, but I feel like I haven't read it. I feel like it's going to be too, like, I feel like I'm going to read it and it's going to remind me of, like, literally reading about saints as, like, growing up Christian. And like,
that might be too triggering.
Get this out. But there are, like, moments where they do talk about other saints, like, kind of throughout the books. And as they obviously introduced the Morozova as, like, the saint and, like, the mystery, I was like, this feels really Christian Catholic to me. I don't know. It's making me feel weird.
Yeah, I think the Morozova thing for me is because I know I don't know how we get there, but I know how that mystery ends. And I thought it would be a more important part of this book, but I guess maybe it's the next book that it's going to be a more important part of. But it feels like it's a pretty important part of the story, if I remember correctly. And so it's kind of weird that we don't spend more time on it here.
Truly, I only know one thing from the next book, and it's about Nikolai. Like, I know his thing, and everything else blocked out. Cannot remember how this book ends at all. It'll
So
be
excited for you. Just
Thank
so
you.
excited.
If I call you crying, it's probably because of this book.
I remember more about the next book than I did about this book. I think because I was so frustrated and upset. That's why while I am glad I'm rereading these books, I think I said last time, I remember now why I didn't unhaul it. But now when I read this book, I remember why I so often think about unhauling these series, because it just gets so close to what I think would be a great story. And I know that that's not what she wants to write, but it just would be great if it would be what I want her to achieve. It's just the ending, to be honest. It's the ending of the next book that really kind of like messes the whole series for me. And,
Wow, I
and
can't wait to unpack that with you in the next.
Yeah, I'm so excited for that talk.
I'm actually really excited for everyone to hear about how people feel about how it ends. I'm really excited.
Are there any questions, comments from people?
People are loving the natural lighting that has. And Ardo also said that Alina just wants agency, which is like, yes, I feel like that is a huge part.
Literally the bare minimum. Give this girl a chance. She just, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we've pretty much like gone to war about the characters at the center of this book.
It's okay. Some people are supposed to be wrong.
We barely talked about the Darkling.
Not there. Well, the Darkling plays like such a small part in this book. Like
he's like creeping her dreams, which is
totally
her. What the heck?
Yeah, he's just being a nuisance.
Not very
I'm like annoyed with his existence at this point. I'm like, you're not helping.
He's in the library and he's like, well, if I was in here, I'd be alone too, or something like that.
That was so sad. And I was like, oh, it's so sad, but you're so evil. Like, sir, let's go elsewhere.
Like, if what you wanted was companionship, you could have done this in a very different way. You kind of went about it wrong.
He did. Yeah, like, and like at this point, he doesn't feel like an actual, like, there's no conflict there was in the first book, like, where like Alina, like she was drawn to his power. Like in this book,
no, you
can tell that he's trying to like manipulate her when he's like, come be powerful with me. Like, Mal will never love you the right way. Like, he's very obviously just trying to get her to come over. Like, it's not as like
come to the dark side.
Yeah, basically. He's like it's sort of like Kylo Ren and fucking Star Wars. The whole like Force Bond thing. I was like, did Rian Johnson read this book?
Can we actually talk about that for a bit? I know we have to go soon, but like the bite. So I still don't quite understand. Like, is it because of the bite that's why they can like do that? Like, I don't quite understand the Bond thing. Like,
isn't it the collar? Isn't it the magic?
She wasn't seeing him before. It was after she got bitten.
I think it's also just the nature of their powers, because they keep on talking about like to like, and they have light and darkness, and nobody else is like them.
Yeah.
I guess he did say like, I only came to you when you were lonely, and like you when you let me, or something like that. He said to that effect, I think.
There was also, hopefully this is not me thinking about the third book, but like what Dulcie was saying about the like to like, and how like for light there needs to be like the darkness type of situation, and how they like very much lean into they're like mirrors of each other, and because their powers are the only two like matched in this universe, that like it allows for them to always have this kind of like overly intense connection. And it's just at this point now that they're able to like get to it.
Maybe.
Yeah, I feel like he didn't realize it was a thing that could happen, and then he did it once and he was like, oh shit.
Ooh, fun. It's like, now I can have a friend that I forced to be my friend.
Yeah, like that. I think like what you were saying, Hannah, is true. Is like why we're so drawn to the Darkling in the first book is because he sees the problems with like the Grisha being treated like second-class citizens within a world when they have the most power, and like he's trying to do the right thing in his brain, but he's taking it too far. Is basically he just reverse it a little bit, sir. Come a little bit back, and we could have been like on the same page.
I mean, he's also ancient, so I think we're forgetting that part. Like, try talking to your 80-year-old grandpa about like some
valid.
He's older than that.
I'm like,
when
you're like whatever, how many 300, 400 years old, and you've like seen 300 and 400 years of oppression, like you're probably going to be a little heavy-handed in your approach. But also, growth. Maybe we don't do it that way right now. Maybe we. I don't know if Ravka, but that would work. That would help.
That is like the best takeaway from this entire show.
Darkling is our grandpa. We should just be like, okay, grandpa.
Okay, so I will end things here. Thank you to everybody who joined us for this heated debate that we had. Join us for book 3 at the end of March. At some point, we'll be discussing book 3, and either I'll be horrified and on Hannah's side, or I'll be okay with whatever
I'm
happens.
gonna be so excited if that's what happens.
So until next time, see you guys. You can follow us on Barnes Babes Book Club on Instagram if you want to see Hannah and I's thoughts as we're reading the book, because we do update there occasionally. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, guys.